Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session in American English Live, Series 19. We are so excited that each of you are here with us today. My name is Chris McDonald, and I'll be with you here today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Elena, who will be the moderator, helping answer your questions and responding to your comments during the session. So let's begin today with these wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Fostering Academic Collaboration for English Language Learners with Aaron Carlson. First up, we have Tahira from Azerbaijan. They say, the webinar was extremely helpful with its simple and important language. I really love the practical example parts of each section, and I can implement the ideas in my online classrooms as well. That's great. Thank you so much for that comment. Next up, we have Malatiana from Madagascar. They say, the session provided effective classroom management techniques that will help me set up collaborative learning in my classes. The activities and routines I learned will greatly help me in planning my next lessons. Thank you so much. Thank you for such a wonderful comment. Next up, we have Mary Helen from Mexico. Wow, I really love the tips about implementing literature circles. Making students read is hard, but with these wonderful tips, I am sure students will love it. You are making my teaching life easier. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mary Helen. What a great comment. So yes, we love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering feedback through the end of session quiz form or by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next session. Throughout Series 19, we're exploring a variety of strategies for building academic skills for success in the EFL classroom. We hope that you are able to use the practical ideas that we have shared. So here's what to expect today. The session will be about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But as usual, we really hope to hear from you, our wonderful, amazing audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. So please share your thoughts using the comments feature or chat box. Then, when our session comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. Once you have successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to get your badge via email within about a week. And before we begin, we want to remind everyone about the upcoming time change here in the United States. Daylight savings time starts on March 10th, and we'll set our clocks forward 1 hour here in the United States. This means that the final 2 Series 19 webinars will take place at 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which may be 1 hour later in your local time zone. You can confirm your local start time for the American English Live 19.5 and 19.6 using the link shown on the slide now and being shared by the moderator. Please enter the dates March 13th and 27th when using the time zone converter. We would also like to let you know about the newest issue of English Teaching Forum, which is now available. Check out volume 61, number 4, to find strategies for helping students counter disinformation, learn how to foster online collaboration, explore how to use choice boards to motivate learners, and so much more. Please visit the link being shared by the moderator now to view the latest issue. And now for today's webinar, we need to talk, discussions that engage all students. To learn to speak a language, students need to converse. Class discussions can create ample opportunities for students to develop their skills, but only when students feel comfortable and engaged. This session explores techniques for maximizing the benefits of discussions by creating opportunities for students to keep up, check in with neighbors, and contribute their voices in a supportive classroom environment. And now we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Dr. Christopher Stillwell. Chris has worked as a teacher educator in Japan, Peru, Laos, and has taught ESL, EFL in Spain, Japan, and the United States as a U.S. Department of State English language specialist. He has worked on projects in Egypt, Brazil, and Mexico, and he has enjoyed presenting 3 other American English Live webinars. At Columbia University, Chris mentored for the TESOL certificate program, and as the College of the Sequoias distance education coordinator, he was responsible for providing professional development related to online instruction. His areas of expertise include English as a medium of instruction, TESOL certificate instruction, and using artificial intelligence to support instruction. Chris was recognized on TESOL's International Association's 50th anniversary list of 30 up-and-coming TESOL professionals, the next generation in research, teaching, publishing, and leadership. Welcome, Chris. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I want to say thanks to everyone for joining. This is a topic that I love to talk about. And because it's about discussions, I want to make sure I'm not the only one sharing ideas. So I hope everyone is ready to participate. In today's session, we will discuss the benefits of discussions within the EFL classroom, and we will explore how to effectively lead discussions. So let's start with the first one. And as we begin, I want to define our terms. What do we mean when we talk about a class discussion? Well, a discussion is a time for students and teacher to talk about something that is related to class. It's an opportunity for students to speak and actively learn. A discussion is not a time for the teacher to do almost all of the talking, which that's what I'm doing right now. Right? It's not a time when students only answer basic questions from the teacher, and it's not a time when students only speak if they have a question. So right away, I hope we can hear from you. What do you think? Why are discussions important for learning? Please type some ideas in the chat.
Yeah, Chris, I'm super curious what our audience thinks. So yeah, everybody, we want to hear from you. So why are discussions important for learning? So please do share in the chat. So Chris, I'm seeing some comments coming in from Dr. Azan saying activating prior knowledge. June is saying input and output, to be actively engaged. Let's give our other audience members a chance to chime in as well. Let's see what we have, everybody. So lots of great ideas coming through. We have another teacher on Facebook saying discussions are important for developing critical thinking and giving students confidence. Ooh, I love that one. Then we have Ghazal Sakira saying, when we do this, students will feel more active. That's wonderful. And let's see, we've got Carmen saying real life skills, conversation using the target language, communication with others. We have Linda Tronley. She's saying relationships, bonding between the teacher and students. Ooh, I love that one. Let's see, I'll give us one more. Okay, Chris, let's see why discussions are important for learning from our teachers. We've got independent thinking. Sharon Ray says it allows students to use their emerging language skills for authentic purposes. Wonderful comments, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing.
These are really great. Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. I also see Anita in Turkey talking about 35 students joining us and talking about peer learning as an opportunity. I think that's fantastic. Oh, these are all great ideas. It kind of makes me feel like maybe you all could give this presentation because we have so many great ideas here. But I think maybe I can share some ideas as well. So I want to start by talking about student-centered instruction. I think that's a good way to approach this. So student-centered instruction in the EFL classroom. See, in a teacher-centered class, the teacher does most of the talking. The students are passive. They don't do very much. They listen, maybe they take notes. But in a student-centered class, the students are active, interact with classmates and the teacher. They practice the language. This makes a big difference. I mean, if we think about it, there are many benefits to this. Some benefits of student-centered discussions are that they can lead to things like increased engagement, right? Students will participate more, which I heard in the chat as well. We get more communication practice. We need to remember that the teacher is not usually the one who needs language practice. It's the students. And so we need to give them time and space to speak, to listen, to practice pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar. And as they do this practicing, they have opportunities to make mistakes. Now, this might seem like we want to avoid that, but no. Mistakes, of course, are good in language learning because we learn from our mistakes. And we cannot just have perfect language come out of our mouths without any opportunities to practice and learn. So this all can happen through the peer interaction that happens in a discussion. So a discussion could be between the teacher and the students. It can also be opportunities for students to talk to one another and get a lot of extra peer interaction. As they do, they build community. They start to feel like this is a class they belong to. They're excited about it. They want to spend more time with these people because they feel that connection. Another interesting thing that happens in a discussion when there's peer interaction is that sometimes students will use their first language. And that's actually also a very good thing. Students have a first language that's a great resource to them. And so, yes, when they interact with the teacher, in most parts of the class, they will use English, but sometimes they need just a little bit of help. And they have that opportunity in these kind of side-by-side conversations they might have, the peer interaction. One more thing I want to share is that, yes, discussions and conversation are very important, of course, for language learning. They're also very important for content learning. So if you are someone who is teaching content through English, maybe you are teaching biology to students in Japan, for example, and you speak English in class, and the students speak English in class, even though it's your second language, or third or fourth, that's a great way for people to build their content learning. And that's true in any language. When we talk to other people about what we're learning, we learn better. So I want to share a little story, very little story. I gave a workshop for teachers in Brazil a few years ago, and I got a really great question from one of the participants. I love this question. He said, I often ask questions, and I give students opportunities to ask me questions. Most students rarely say anything. Why don't students participate? Well, this is a great question for us, I think. So I want to ask everybody, what do you think? What advice could you give this teacher? Again, please share your ideas in the chats.
Yes, everybody, we'd love to hear from you. So what type of advice would you give to this teacher? So Chris just shared this story about working with some people in Brazil and their students don't necessarily participate. So what are some ideas that you can share and what advice could you give this teacher? We'd love to hear from you. Let's see, Chris, let's give our audience a few moments to respond. So
yeah, it's fascinating to see the responses that are coming in already. I'm excited to see what everyone has to say here.
Absolutely. Let's see. I'm seeing Yu Zhang is saying to design activities that engage students. So in a situation that they feel the urge to ask. So that's great. Other teachers are talking about just motivating students. Let's see, providing students some sentence starters to generate their ideas from Carmen. That's a great idea. Yeah. Irana's talking about choosing topics of interest or topics that interest the students. I really like that. Let's see. One piece of advice or a comment coming in about this, I think related to maybe why students don't participate is, one teacher is saying that they might be afraid of negative feedback or they might be afraid to make mistakes, but you can already address that it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. And I'll share another, someone gave a piece of advice for this teacher. Halima Kumina says the teacher can give more input before students speak. I like that one too.
These are great. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of responses that sort of indicate that there are things a teacher can do to influence the nature of the discussion, that there are behaviors that we can do. I saw an interesting comment about maybe there's a culture in the classroom of silence or something like that. And so these are fascinating challenges and things to be aware of as a teacher. And yes, I agree with everyone who said there are things we can do to influence it. Now, when I think about the possible challenges and the reasons for these problems, I think of some reasons for low participation. And maybe it could be, as I'm hearing some people say, maybe the students don't really understand the discussion so far. Maybe they feel lost. Maybe they don't feel confident that they understand, or maybe they don't feel confident that they have a good, valuable contribution to make. Maybe and this is the most interesting for me, maybe there are teacher behaviors that are reducing participation. Maybe the teacher is doing something that actually makes the students be quiet for some reason. And there are some things we can think about in that area. And finally, maybe the students just feel shy, and we need to think about how can we make them feel less shy. So in today's presentation, we are going to talk about solutions to each of these kinds of problems. So now let's shift to the second part, where we explore how to effectively lead discussions. And in this part, we talk about leading discussions effectively by making participation easier, by conducting the conversation, and I'll explain what that means, conducting, by paraphrasing, this is a really nice skill, and finally, by ending a discussion well. So if we focus on number one there, making participation easier, we see an image of a water slide and people kind of wanting to get to that pool, and it's very easy to get down there. And we might think of how can we make a discussion kind of like that situation, right? And so in this section about making participation easier, we will talk about four things. We will talk about using technology, translation, and images, having students write before they discuss, using nonverbal forms of participation, and something called peer instruction, which might be a new term, but it's a very interesting technique, I think. So the first one about this technology and translations. When we want to communicate the topic, one thing we can do to make participation easier is if we make sure that everyone understands what they are supposed to talk about. An obvious way to do that is to use students' first language for support. So in the past, it might not have been practical to use occasional translations in a class like mine. Chris, I'm teaching a class where I have students from Ukraine, from Iran, from Mexico, from all over the world. There are 13 different languages in my classroom. And so it would be very difficult and time consuming for me to try to translate things to help students, right? But now with generative AI and other tools, it's easy. I can ask the generative AI to make a translation into multiple languages at once, and when it would feel helpful. And so here's my example, and we can see just 4 languages because I didn't want to put 13 languages on the slide, but trust me, you can do it. So, okay, so that's one thing we can do. Another thing we can do to make sure that students understand what's going on is we might reduce the need for any kind of language at all. We might choose an image to communicate our topic, because images can often be understood without words. In our case, I could show you all a picture of a person writing, and I could ask you to discuss how that could be connected to discussions. Or I could tell you something simple about the picture, and I could give you something more to discuss. So for me, this image represents another technique for making it easier for students to participate in a discussion. Before a discussion, we can have students silently write about the topic. Now, I want to try it now, but I want to try in a special way. So hold on. Think about this question. It says, what are some benefits of having students write before they discuss? Now, I want you to type your own ideas about this technique, but do not post them yet. Please wait. So you can type, and wait, because we're going to do something special about the posting. Now, Chris, while everyone is thinking and typing, maybe you and I can talk about this for just a moment. And remember, everyone, type your answers. Don't post yet. Hold on. Thank you. Now, Chris, do you ever have students write something before they discuss?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So sometimes, for example, I might have students write something for their homework, for example, and then they'll talk about it in class. And so, yeah, that's probably one basic example that I've done before, for sure.
That's a great approach. Yes. Sometimes I think it depends on how complex the activity or the discussion is. If we want students to have a lot of ideas ready and they need to maybe prepare for the conversation, homework is definitely a great idea before the discussion. Okay, well, I think we're almost ready for the next moment. So get ready, everyone. I hope you've finished kind of typing an idea. You're not going to post yet, but in an online session like ours, we can go from silent writing to one more thing. We can do something called an idea cascade. So we wait until everyone has a chance to write some kind of idea, and then we get everyone ready to post all at once. So are you ready, everyone? Are you set? Okay, go. Please post. We see an image of a waterfall coming down, and that's what we should see in the chat also. A lot of ideas coming in. kind of like a waterfall.
Yeah, Chris, I'm seeing some great ideas coming in. People are saying, the benefits of having students right before classes that allows them to organize their ideas clearly so that they're more confident to share with others in class. I think that's great. Another teacher said that it helps to correct their ideas or to help them summarize of maybe what they've read to kind of really help them express what they want to share.
Nice.
Just overall organizational skills. It helps the students to be more organized. Just kind of allows students to gather information and maybe to brainstorm other ideas before coming into class and speaking in front of their classmates. We also have some great comments coming in too, Chris. Just someone saying just the idea of planning and the students planning and then kind of sharing their opinions. So it's not really wasting their time. They come to class prepared and ready to go. I really like that. Here's a great technique too that I love using too, and teach my students is after reading something, doing some mind mapping or making a word wall. Kind of helps them to gather ideas for specific vocabulary. Yeah, lots of ideas of just being organized, building confidence in students. Maybe if there's a timeline that things are in chronological order, if there's a beginning, middle, and end. So yeah, lots of great comments, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you, everyone. These are great. And so I can add a little bit here. One thing we maybe all noticed is with this technique, it gives students thinking time, right? So no one has to feel pressure to give an answer right away, and it has to be a great answer, or maybe they don't think that hard and they give an answer that's not so good. Everybody has time to think, and well, that's good. People need time to think. And at the same time, it allows students to prepare and refine their ideas. And Chris, maybe you noticed in the chat, when we saw all these ideas here, I saw some very organized ideas, very well thought out. People chose their words carefully. It was very easy to understand what they wanted to say. And I think that was probably partially because they had a little time to think about it and put it together. It also allows every student to join the conversation with confidence, right? Very often in a class, if I say, does anybody have an idea? I'll have maybe the same students always raising their hand and ready to jump in with an answer. And I may have many other students who never participate. But with something like this, I'm making it more possible for everyone to join in. Another idea is that it makes it easier for the quieter students to participate. In particular, I can call on them. And that's a good technique for teachers to use sometimes, is to call on a student by name if you notice they're not participating. Now, we might feel afraid of making a student uncomfortable with that. But if the student has written something first, we can ask them very simply something like, Luciana, can you tell us one idea that I saw you writing something. Would you mind, can you share one idea that you wrote down? And so maybe that can take some of the pressure off. It gives that extra support for the student to feel like, oh, well, I can read what I wrote here, and maybe they can join the conversation. So I have another question now. What about in a face-to-face classroom? What should happen next? So students wrote something. They're not going to click and post something to the chat. They're going to do something in class. And so what do you think? What should happen after students write? Well, one idea is, and many of you have probably heard about this, think, pair, share. And I'm going to call it think and write, pair, share, because we're doing writing together with the thinking. And the way this works is we can do this anytime, and it can be used with any situation, and we need almost no preparation. As a teacher, we say, it feels like a good moment for this. Let's get some interaction and thinking happening. And so during class, we ask students to write, to think about something and to write on the topic. Then they join a neighbor and they talk about it together. From there, when we're ready, when it seems appropriate, the instructor closes the activity and invites volunteers to share from the conversations they have had. Now, during this situation, we can also add some other kind of techniques to it. One thing we can do is while the students are talking to their neighbors, maybe that's not a time for us to get distracted by something else. As the teacher, we can walk around the room and we can listen and we can see where students need help. We can give help directly to students in the moment, or we can kind of make a note of something that we want to share with the whole class. And after a few minutes, we might decide that we want to get pairs to join with other pairs. Maybe we notice that there's a variety of opinions in the room, and we want to get bigger groups so they can discuss more of these opinions and have a little bit of an interesting conversation that way. Or maybe we're moving to a second phase of the activity. Finally, After we finish, we can call on different partners during the share, right? So in the share part, the whole class is listening together and one person talks at a time. As a teacher, I can make sure to call on all the partners on the right for the first question, perhaps, and then maybe I call on all the partners on the left for the second question, for example. I can try to get participation from almost everyone, and it's a little bit easier for me to call on people. They should feel a little more comfortable participating because they've had so much preparation talking to their neighbors.
Lots of people are loving your ideas. Indeed, Chris, you were correct. Lots of the teachers have heard of the Think, Pair, Share, but people are loving these more ideas for pair work. And I'd just like to share a few comments that teachers are saying, doing these kind of pair work activities, it helps more passive students gain confidence, and it kind of helps them maintain a healthy learning environment, not only between student to student, but also between student to teacher. But there is one question coming in too. How do you deal with beginner students? Will you share? Can you still do this Think, Pair, Share and other pair activities with a beginner student? And how will they share? Do they share in their own language, in their L1, or any advice for teachers where you have students multi-levels in the same group or in the same pairs?
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for the person who gave that question. That's a really great question. Yeah, absolutely. We can use this with any level of student, but it's true. With beginner students, we might need some more preparation. So we can give students support in many different ways, right? It can be as simple as a conversation of introduce yourself to your partner and say, hi, how are you doing? And maybe we have some of those vocabulary words on the board. Maybe we practice as a class a few things before we ask students to talk to their neighbors. And then for an actual discussion of talking about things, maybe we give students the language of, where are you from? What do you like? Some very basic things to introduce themselves, but maybe we also let them use their first language a little bit at times as well. So there's no rule that says that we have to always be in English. I can tell you that I've had a lot of great success with allowing all kinds of languages in the classroom, but I, as the teacher, of course, always bring us back to English before very long. Thanks, Chris. That was a great question. What do you think, Chris? I'll turn it back to you. Do you think I answered that okay?
Yeah, no, great response, Chris. That was wonderful. And that was a teacher, Rocco, too. So I just want to give him a shout out for asking that great question. No, I totally agree with you. That was a wonderful response. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, great. Well, so let's do a little recap. We've already talked about several ideas, and I want to make sure that we kind of understand it and have them before we go to the next part of our presentation. So the first thing is we want to make sure students understand the discussion topic. And so maybe we use images, maybe we translate, we give support. Maybe, as we just mentioned, maybe we put phrases on the board that students will use. And so there are many options there to make sure students really understand before we set them free to talk to their neighbors or before we ask them to join a class discussion. After that, another thing to think about is we want to give all students an equal chance to participate. And so we want to give everyone a moment, perhaps, to write about it silently. This kind of makes things more equal in the classroom. Now, in an online class like ours, we can ask everyone to wait before they share their post in an idea cascade. That's what I'm calling it. I heard that somewhere, kind of like a waterfall of ideas. But in face-to-face classrooms, maybe it's better to do something like this Think, Pair, Share, or thinking and writing, pairing and sharing. Now, another idea to make participation easier for students is we can use nonverbal forms of participation. We can ask students to use gestures to participate, such as thumbs up or thumbs down, right? That can express agreement, disagreement, true, false, good, bad, lots of different things. Sometimes I'll ask students, what do you think? Is this easy or difficult or somewhere in between? There are lots of different things we can do with just thumbs up, thumbs down to get everyone participating. If we want to use multiple choice, we can ask students to give a vote using their fingers. And so maybe choice 1 is 1 finger and choice 2 or choice B is 2 fingers, etc. Now, a nonverbal alternative to using fingers would be to use a piece of paper. And I've seen some teachers use something where maybe they take a piece of paper and they've got 4 different colors on the paper, and students can fold the paper to show their vote. They can decide if they're voting for choice 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And one nice thing about this is that it allows all students to prepare their vote independently. They're not maybe looking around to see what their classmates are doing. I hope we can say, okay, keep your vote a secret, put it, okay, and then everybody ready? Show your votes. And maybe it's easier to get everyone going at once. I think we can probably do that with our fingers as well, but the paper can be a fun alternative. All right, now I want to explore these techniques more closely through an example of full class participation with multiple choice questions. And this technique I mentioned earlier, peer instruction, I want to tell you what that's about. I'm pretty excited. So let's imagine a situation. It's the beginning of a class, and the teacher wants the students to have some warm-up conversations. So she says, let's have a conversation about mornings. First, what are some questions we can ask? She wants to get questions from the students. She's getting them to support their own conversation by getting them to help each other prepare. So students give many different answers. The teacher notices something interesting though. Like one student suggests something like, what time do you wake up? And another student later suggests something like, what time are you wake up? And students are repeating these different ideas, and the teacher notices that maybe these students need help with using be and do in questions. This is a common issue, actually, in beginner levels of English. So now the teacher wants to know if this is something that many students are confused about. So she writes the two versions on the board as a choice. She'll write number one, what time are you wake up? And she underlines the are. And number two, what time do you wake up? And she underlines the do. Now notice, she's not telling them which one is right or which one is wrong. She's just putting them up there. And then she asks the students to vote for which one they think is correct by raising one finger or two fingers. And so the votes start to come in, and the teacher notices, okay, we've got a vote for two, there's a vote for one, and more votes come in. And the teacher notices that maybe there's a variety of things happening here. One thing is, yeah, there's participation from maybe 7 students, but actually 13 or 20 students in my class. So, okay, the teacher might now go around and increase participation by checking in with the students who are not voting and saying, hey, how's it going? Do you understand the question? Can I help you with anything? And maybe use the first language for a moment to clarify some things, and then say, so what do you think? Do you think it's number one or number two? I want to know what you think, right? And so in that fashion, the teacher can get all the students to participate and really quickly find out who is ready to participate and not. And then we come back and we start thinking, okay, we look around the room and we see all the votes. And if many of the students, like maybe, I don't know, 30% might be a lot, 60% is definitely a lot. If many students are giving the wrong answer, well, now I have a question for you all. What should we do next? So let's hear from you. What should we do when we see that many students are voting for the wrong answer? Please share your ideas in the chat. And Chris, as we're waiting for everyone to type the responses in the chat, I'm curious, is this something that you have encountered? Have you ever been teaching and you notice that a lot of students just, they don't seem to get it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just reflecting on my teaching career, I think when I was a beginner teacher, when this happened, when students wouldn't get it, you know, I would feel kind of like frustrated or even concerned sometimes, or maybe even inadequate. Like, am I doing a good job? You know, like I'm responsible for these students, especially when I'm trying lots of different teaching strategies. But as I grew and became a more experienced teacher, you know, I viewed it more as a challenge and an opportunity to kind of help my students and to kind of expand my toolkit as a teacher, different teacher strategies. So, you know, just seeing students maybe a lack of motivation or shy, you know, at first, yeah, it kind of caused those like frustrated or kind of like scary thoughts. But as I got more confidence in myself as a teacher, as I said, I viewed it more as like as an opportunity, as a challenge that I welcomed.
I love that, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. It's what a great perspective that this could be an opportunity, right? At first it might seem like a bad thing, but it's actually an opening for us to do something.
Absolutely, that opening, yeah, it was like a chance to try new methods. You know, I hope teachers out here today watching are learning some new methods, you know, where students might not, you know, want to participate. They're learning something new from you to try something new to kind of add to their teaching toolbox.
So Chris, what kind of responses are we getting in the chat?
Let's see here. Yeah, lots of different chats, lots of different comments coming in. Let's see. We had Evangelina saying in this case that her students vote with their hands because she has bad eyesight. So that's kind of interesting. And just general comments too, Chris. People just saying lots of excellent ideas. Thanks, Chris, especially with nonverbal language for shy students. We have Noni saying that she would ask them to think again. We have Dinar saying they would ask the students, why did they choose that answer? And if they're able to use the language to let them rationalize or explain. So lots of other teachers are saying kind of to explain again that specific topic or to provide examples for them. So yeah, lots and lots of comments. We'll have to address those later. They're zooming in on this, Chris. It's great.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I'm noticing that there are a number of different kind of approaches to this. And several people are saying things like, maybe I should change my teaching strategy. Maybe I need to approach the lesson differently. Maybe I need to explain more. And that's a very natural thing to think. And those are good techniques sometimes. But in this circumstance, I'm going to encourage you to try something different. My advice in this circumstance is to use student-centered techniques. And so in that case, what does that mean? That means as the teacher, do not say that some students are wrong. Don't even say that. Do not tell students what the correct answer is. Definitely don't give them the answer yet. No, 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 no. And do not reteach. That might feel strange, right? I'm a teacher. I should teach. Come on, Chris, that's my job. But let's think about this for a moment. We can try something else. We can try peer instruction. So peer instruction, what happens here is we ask students to talk to neighbors about how they answered and why. Again, we don't need to say that anyone was wrong. We just, talk about your answers. Explain why you gave the answer you did. And during this time, we can move around the room. We can see if there are any students who need a partner, any students who are really struggling with something and they need help. But once students get used to this as a routine, they will jump into it very quickly and easily, maybe on the second or third time you try this. And we can also help students who don't have a partner, as I mentioned, or who need support. And then we make this whole thing last for about 1 minute. It's very, very short, but we give students 1 minute to talk to each other. We just kind of explore what's going on. And then after that, we bring the class back together and we ask the students to vote again. Now, this time, we will notice if the votes have changed. And so we start seeing votes coming in and we see, all right, there's a vote for 2 and a 1, but oh, look at that. We've got a few more. Oh, wow. Okay, so it looks like the votes are mostly for number 2. And they're not all for number 2, but 2 is much more popular this time. That's very, very interesting, right? And so that's typical, actually. There will usually be more votes for the correct answer because the students figure things out as they discuss it together. So from that point, what happens next? Well, we invite the students to explain their answers, right? Now, usually, you can just ask someone who had the correct answer to get their explanation. But sometimes it's good to call in someone who was incorrect first, so you can learn more about what they were thinking. And maybe you can expand the critical thinking and the discovery, right? And it can also help you kind of adapt your instruction to match what they need. But of course, after you hear from students a little bit about maybe the correct answer, maybe both answers, then the teacher can confirm what the correct answer is and add some further explanation. But again, this is very student-centered. The students are figuring things out themselves. It's how we learn a language. We need to do the work ourselves. And so there's a lot happening for the students. They are active. Okay, now, I'd like to go to a transition now to the conducting the conversation part of our talk today. And so when we talk about conducting, I guess what I'm saying here is, in many ways, a teacher who is facilitating a discussion is similar to the leader of a group of musicians. The teacher is like an orchestra conductor who leads the musicians to make beautiful music together. And in this case, they're making beautiful English together, I hope. So in this section, I want to talk about 5 techniques that make me think about a conductor working with musicians. And so a conductor might use silence. That's often a very important part of music, actually, that pause, right? Another thing is the conductor wants to bring out great performances from the musicians or from the students in this case. And music and a conductor can have music take a form that kind of has a sense of mystery, that makes people interested in hearing more. They want to, wait, where is this going? And that's something that teachers can do as well. Another thing we'll talk about is allowing participants to respond to each other, right? So musicians can make beautiful music together and they listen and they feel something happening in one person's part of the music and they respond to that. And that can happen in conversation as well. Another thing, of course, is in an orchestra and in a classroom, we want to hear from all the members. It would really be a shame. Can you imagine an orchestra where somebody comes in and they unpack their instrument, they've got their violin and they sit there with their violin for the whole concert and they never touch it? That's what happens sometimes when students come to class and they don't participate. So let's go a little deeper. But first, I want to hear from you about that first one about silence. So everybody, what do you think? Why is it important for the teacher to remain silent after asking a question? Please share your ideas in the chat. And now, Chris, for this one, we're talking about the importance of silence. So maybe should we try it for a moment? And should we just be quiet for a second?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's be quiet for a little bit.
Okay, all right. Oh. Hey, Chris, does it ever feel awkward to kind of wait in silence?
Maybe sometimes, but for me, I think it kind of gives me a chance to kind of to reflect and kind of process maybe like what I'm learning, or when I'm a student, when I think about it as a student, like what the teacher is saying. So yeah, it can be awkward sometimes, but I also view it as a time to reflect and to be able to process things as well.
I like that.
I also think of like mindfulness too. One of our, on the educators page this month, our theme is mindfulness. So I'm thinking of our guest expert teacher and that quiet time of having some mindfulness in the classroom.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Well, so Chris, what do you think? Are we getting some good responses in the chat here?
Yeah, give me a second here. So everybody, yeah, please let us know, as Chris and I just demonstrated, why do you think it's important for a teacher to remain silent in the classroom? Let's see. So yeah, Chris, we do have some great comments coming in. People are saying it allows students to concentrate. It can kind of allow them that think time to kind of process their ideas before they speak. It's also a way or a technique, one teacher says, to kind of get their attention. The teacher wants to make the students be quiet. We have another teacher, Kyle Kohler, saying it's important for teachers to be silent during a discussion, because the point of a classroom discussion is not about the teacher, but the students and their language productions. That's a great comment, Kyle. Thank you for sharing.
I love that, yeah.
Let's see, we have another teacher saying, Carrie, saying to maybe it can help to prevent stress or anxiety among their students. Another teacher saying that silence is important because it gives them time to think, and the awkwardness perhaps draws their attention in so they can focus more. Lots of great responses coming in. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Can we talk normal again now? I feel like we're just
I think so, yeah. So everybody,
right.
we're going to go back to our normal voices. So if you turn up your volume really loud, I hope we're not hurting your ears right now. But yeah, this is great. So, and Chris, you and I were just talking about, like, in some cultures, silence can be uncomfortable. I think that's true, especially for teachers in the West, like me. And definitely, I have felt that. So in that case, sometimes some additional tips can help. So the first thing is, I think it's good as a teacher to remind yourself of the need to create space for participation. Just try to remember, this is part of your job as an educator. After we ask students a question, we wait, and we don't need to over-explain. And if you're asking students if they have questions for you, well, you really need to wait, because at first they may be surprised that you're inviting them to talk. And then they might need a moment to think of how to phrase their question. And they may need time to gather their confidence before raising their hand as well. So to fill the time, sometimes I will actually, in my mind, count to 7 in my head. I'll just count it off. And I hope people don't see my lips moving as I go 2, 3, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes I let students know that's my routine, so they know I'm serious, I'm going to wait. Another thing that I like to do, and I just did it just now, Chris, is I have a water bottle nearby, and I just grab a sip of water at those moments when I want to be sure that I do not invade their space or that talking time, that I create that moment for them. And I also, of course, well, hydration is good, right? There are many, many positive things about that drink of water, but it forces me to give them. Okay, now let's go to another idea here. The next, bringing out great performances. So after we wait, we will often get some participation from students. And at that point, we really want to help the student give their best performance. So here are some things we can do. We can appreciate all contributions. So it doesn't matter if the contribution is correct or not correct. we're thrilled to have somebody jumping into and participating. So we can just kind of have that warm and receptive attitude towards everybody, of course. And then we can ask probing questions to get contributors to say more, right? So somebody said something, we can say, all right, well, that's very interesting. Can you tell me more about that? What makes you say that? Or what are some more ideas, right? Now, as we ask these probing questions, maybe you noticed that I avoided yes or no questions, right? So the yes or no questions, they're useful sometimes, but they're not going to get a very big response from students. They might just get this or this, and not very much participation, right? So instead, we want to use open-ended questions, right? The who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. Now, I just said why, but I actually would recommend that you be careful with why questions. Why questions are great for understanding somebody's thinking and what was behind their thinking. But we need to think about that sometimes why can feel like an attack. If I'm in an argument with someone, for instance, and they tell me, I don't agree with you. And if I say, why, right? It sounds like I'm saying, defend yourself, right? And so we want to be very careful about that. The why is often called an attacking question. So if we use why, we want to be extra warm about it, or we can use alternate phrasing. We can say something like, that's very interesting. Can you tell me more about that? And when we say, can you tell me more about that? The answer will be something like the answer to a why question. So that's, and I think that's nice, isn't it? To sort of say, I'm interested. I love what you said. I want to hear more. That's kind of a more positive and supportive way to bring out these great performances from the students. Now, before we go to our next technique for conducting conversations, I have a question for everyone. It's a poll question. So you see here, it says, when a student gives a good answer to a discussion question, what should the teacher do? And so I've got 4 choices for you. Maybe we say, correct, great job. Maybe we ask the student to explain why they said that. Or maybe we say, I don't know. Class, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Why or why not? Or one other choice, maybe we say, that's pretty good. But, and then maybe we fix something about the pronunciation or the grammar in the student's speech. So these are 4 choices, and I want to invite everybody to vote. So you can just type in the chat A, B, C, or D. Which one do you think is best, right? And Chris, while everybody's thinking about it, what do you think? Like, let's talk about A for a second. What could be some good things about A?
Yeah, no, A is okay. I think it provides motivation for the students. You're giving that students, telling them good job. I think it also with A will build the students' confidence. I think that's probably the biggest thing right there. Maybe, you're reinforcing their use of correct language by giving them that positive reinforcement. So yeah, it's kind of, I would overall say like motivation and just confidence building overall with A for sure.
Chris, it's fascinating. I'm looking at the chat, and thank you so much for that. I totally agree that there are a lot of good things about A. There are good things about all of them, really. But did you notice this, Chris? In the chat, it seems like C is the most popular choice here. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm only
I am
seeing
C.
in my version of the chat.
Yeah, I'm
That's
just seeing a
fascinating to me.
lot. I've seen a few vary over on Facebook. I'm seeing a few different things, but I'm definitely seeing C. Would you like to share why, or what do you think, Chris?
Yeah. Well, so this is fascinating. I agree. I think C is the best one, and so I'm sure we could get some great responses from everybody. But I would share that I think this is the most student-centered response, right? And it keeps some mystery, so that everyone will say interested in the topic, and interested in the question. And it can increase discussion by making room for more people to respond. See, it's very natural for us to think that as the teacher, we hear a good answer, we say, good job, like we're the boss of everything, right? And I guess we are the boss of everything, but we can distribute that responsibility and distribute the participation if we invite people to comment toward each other. So that's something to think about. We want to allow participants to respond to each other. And so maybe the teacher should not be the only one who responds, right? Peers can comment as well. We can help if we ask probing questions. So we can say something like, what do you think about that idea, everyone? Would anyone like to say more about that? Can anyone think of any possible problems with that answer? Or can you think of any additional reasons why you like that answer? And maybe we don't throw all those questions out at once, but we say something and we see how we can get students to participate and continue exploring the topic. And at this moment, I think it's good to remember that we often have eager students in our class. Maybe they're sitting in the front row, they're confident, they're attentive, they're ready to participate. And those are the students who will participate all the time, and we don't have to worry about them very much. But we have to be careful because at the same time, many other students may be kind of in the shadows, less confident, participating less. And if we are not careful, we might lose sight of them altogether. That's why we need to use all the different techniques we are talking about today to make sure that all students are engaged and they are all learning. So another thing I want to talk about now that we've talked about these first two topics is the idea of paraphrasing. And for paraphrasing, we are talking about communicating the same idea by using different words. And so as we go to the next slide, you'll see we've got kind of a parrot here. I don't know if a parrot's the best image, but it kind of works, right? So we're communicating the same idea by using different words. And so let's think about some useful language for this kind of situation. For example, if a student contributes something to our discussion, we can say things like, it sounds like you're saying that, and then we kind of repeat what they said. Or, so let me see if I understand. Are you saying that da 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 da? Or we can repeat by saying, wow, okay. So in other words, and then again, we repeat the same idea, but we use our own words. We can also repeat exactly what the student said, but we can use rising intonation. So Chris, here's an example. During a class discussion, one of the students speaks up and they say something like, I know many people don't like the character, but I identify with them. Their actions are brave and kind. All right, everybody, it's time to hear from you again. What do you think? How can the teacher increase student participation through paraphrasing? In other words, what's a good way the teacher could paraphrase this student's comment for the rest of the class? Please share some ideas in the chat. And while everyone is thinking about this and putting some ideas out there, Chris, I'm going to give you a quick quiz. Do you remember on the last slide, we had like 4 or 5 ideas of kind of language that people can use to paraphrase? So what are some good phrases we can use when we paraphrase?
Yeah, sure. I think one of them was, it sounds like you are saying that, ... or let me see if I understand. Did I understand that? Or are you saying that? Or I think the last one was, in other words. I think those are correct. I think those were some of the ways, those kind of phrases.
Exactly. Yeah. In other words, it sounds like you're saying that. You got it. We can also repeat what the student said with rising intonation. So in this case, it might be saying something like, so their actions are brave and kind, right? And just repeating and having that rising intonation kind of makes it a question where the student gets a chance to hear their own words and they get to say yes. Or maybe they say no, maybe they want to change it. And so actually, Chris, on the next slide, we have some ideas about some benefits of paraphrasing, right? So when we paraphrase, one thing I really like about this is that maybe it's not easy to do, but as you paraphrase, you, first of all, you find out if you understood what the teacher wanted to say. That's important. But we also let the student hear themselves. And when they kind of hear their own words come back to them, they can reflect on it and maybe decide if they want to change anything. So it helps the student communicate what they really wanted to say, or even helps them discover something new that they hadn't thought about, as it just kind of get that thinking time and processing time to reflect on what they said. Now, it's not just for you and the student, though. It's for the whole class. Because when we paraphrase, we allow other students a second chance to hear and to understand. And another nice thing about this is, so it makes it easier for all students to join the conversation as well. They feel confident that they know what's going on. Okay, oh yeah, what the teacher said is what I thought the student said. I was right about that. And we're all together, right? Another thing is we show that we heard the student. And so this kind of validates the student. It shows that we are receiving their communication. They are communicating effectively in English. And they're successful in many ways. And one thing I love about this idea of hearing a student, I want to share a quote here, Chris. And the quote is, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable, right? So we almost can't see the difference between being heard and being loved. And if you think about relationships in your own life, maybe you have an experience like that, where somebody who listens to you is really a person who is close to you in your life, and when you feel heard by them. So I really appreciate that. Okay, well, now that we've finished talking about those first three topics, it's time to talk about closing the discussion, about ending well. And so one of the first things we can do is we can recap the discussion, right? We can note some of our objectives and how we accomplished them. So for example, today, we set out to talk about the benefits of discussion, as well as some ways to lead discussions effectively. And I hope you all feel like you're coming away with some good ideas in these areas, and we could go a little deeper. And so maybe the next thing we could do is we could do something a little more student-centered about our closing. Instead of me repeating what we did and explaining what we did, I mean, I did that already perhaps, but that's maybe the way I did it didn't get through for some reason. So it's better many times to ask the students to do the recap. Ask them to tell you what this talk was about. Maybe you have a picture that represents the different parts, and maybe you have a title, but maybe you ask the students to look at these pictures and maybe give one example for each. And we could use the writing technique, right, Chris? We could ask everybody to write an idea for each of them first, and then they talk. So everybody's getting that individual thinking time, and then they get to share out again. And as a teacher, I paraphrase what I hear, and I find out what did they understand. Okay, now we also want to remember at the end of a discussion that we want to appreciate students' hard work. Many times I am very, very impressed with my students. They were not shy. Somebody new joined the conversation today. Lots of great ideas came out, and I know this is not easy to do. You are speaking English as a second or as a foreign language, and you're communicating. This is amazing, everyone. I want to really express my appreciation for that. Now, we can also allow some time to take questions. And maybe we want to suggest resources. Like for today, if you liked the conversation about discussions, please wait. There's a slide coming with some additional resources, some things that you can read to get some more information, including an article that I wrote. We can also tell students that they can continue the conversation with us if they want to. And in my case, I'd be very happy to continue with any of you. And I'm going to share my email address as a way of communicating after the session. Usually we have many different ways that our students can reach us if they need to. One more thing, we can ask students to submit an exit ticket. This is like a piece of paper, and maybe they just write something, one thing they'll remember from the talk, or maybe one question. And so we could invite people to share something like that in the chat right now if they wanted to. But the main thing that I want to do though right now, Chris, as we wrap up, is I want to also remember that it's good to close with a call to action, right? So we've got everybody in the same room. We've all focused on the same topic. In this case, we've all focused on discussions because we care about we are teachers who care about getting students to participate in class and be active. And so at the end, we want to remind students, why did this all matter? And maybe inspire them to take what we did today and apply it to do something, and maybe give them some guidance about where they could go next. So in our case, I would like us to remember how easy it is to give our attention to the students who are already comfortable speaking up, and how easy it is to lose track, to kind of almost forget about the many other silent students in a class who may be lost and falling behind. So in order to reach more of our students, I encourage you to choose one technique from our discussion today, maybe something that's new for you, and try it out in your next class, and really make sure that you're getting everyone to engage in your class. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris. I really had a great time discussing discussions.
Wow, thank you so much, Chris. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing such helpful techniques for maximizing the benefits for discussion for all students. That was awesome. So, of course, we'd also like to thank you, our awesome audience, for your great engagement and participation today.